Hey everybody, welcome back to Bug Proletariat 40K. And I appreciate all the people watching my last video. I know it was a while since the last time I posted, but this one's coming out pretty quick after, so hopefully some of you are pumped about that I'm getting back to creating more of the GSC content more regularly. And actually one of the comments I got from my last video was if I could cover the list that was kind of the Jackal bike spam list. And while I've never actually played this list, I'll be very honest about that up front. I'm pretty sure I know what makes it work, what makes it tick, and I'm actually pretty interested to give it a try myself to see if it actually works the way I think it does. And I just went on my BCP app and checked that a couple players did very, very, very well with it, and some actually didn't do that great with it. So I think 40K right now, especially in the place that it's in competitively, it is more about who's piloting the list than what army you're playing to the best degree that it can be in 40K. So that's good for us. We actually have a chance to win, and people are doing good with GSC, and this is one of the lists that they're doing good with. So I thought it'd be cool to cover it on the channel. So the list itself, I'll put a sample list, kind of what I would run, down in the comments below. But I'm not going to have a full list here because you can kind of build it any way you want. There are just some things that are kind of required. And first off, as far as your cult traits, I think you definitely go myriad cults with War Convoy, Accustomed to Turmoil, that Industrial Affinity, and Cold-Eyed Killers. So you'll notice these are all the 1.1s, and they lean into helping out your bikes the most. So those bikes are T4, so the Accustomed to Turmoil is not really going to help them all that much unless it's that stuff hits strength 8. But you're definitely going to want to run a bunch of neophytes with guns with this, is how I'm going to play it. So those T3 neophyte bodies are going to benefit from that a ton. That little bit of defense is going to be backed up by a War Convoy for your bikes, giving all your bikes and your vehicles a 6-up Feel No Pain. And with just so many bikes on the table and reviving bikes with Icon Ward, the 6-up Feel No Pain is going to be super annoying for your opponents. I mean, I'm pretty sure all of us have played the Space Marine with the Apothecary, where they get a 6-inch bubble of Feel No Pains, and you do 2 wounds and they roll that 1/6. So obviously it's just 16% chance more that you'll stop a wound, but over time and with so many bikes, it's just that much more defensibility built into your list. The Industrial Affinity is just the best of the 1-point myriad cult upgrades. So being able to ignore any downsides to any mining weapons, I mean, you're still going to have to build melee threats into this, so doing it on cutters is huge. Neophytes with mining weapons like the shooting guns, mining lasers, or seismic cannons, ignoring the penalty to move and shoot, or forests is huge. This is just a great all-rounder that I think if you take a myriad cults list, you just take Industrial Affinity. And then the last one that gets thrown in here is Cold-Eyed Killers, and this just gives you 6s on your to wound roll, just up that armor penetration by 1. So this is really good, especially in an armor contempt world. It can kind of get around that if you roll some 6s on your wound roll, but also it starts to give your things like your bikes in close combat some, some ability to get some AP on their attacks, which is nice. So what makes this the GSC bike spam list? Like, what's required in the list is that Icon Ward that's there to use his little banner to bring the bikes back and anybody else that's within the 6 inches of him, and 3 squads of 8 bikes and 2 wolf quads each, so it's 10 models in that squad. The 8 bikes, I would keep them pretty simple, just with maybe 1 demolition charge in there. I probably wouldn't give them close combat weapons. I wouldn't even bother with the extra points. And then the 2 wolf quads, I think the flamers are the way to go here. And actually one player that I saw who did very well, that's actually what he included on his wolf quads. The mining lasers just get one shot, and they're just going to be very, very swingy. As opposed to the flamers, you know, they're good into demons, Eldar, sisters. Yeah, the AP into armor contempt probably sucks, but they're going to make them take a ton of saves, which is awesome. And especially even with just the shotgun shots and the bikes, you're going to make things just take a ton of saves, and some damage will get through. But the advantage of the list really isn't the damage that these giant bike squads can put out. It's their durability and the ability to revive them again with that icon ward, their speed, and just the way they can clog up the battlefield. So the bikes are moving 14 inches, and then you can string them back to your icon ward. Bikes are -1 hit in shooting and close combat, which makes them tougher. You have the Accustomed to Turmoil and the War Convoy on them to make them a little tougher. Now, I'm not saying one squad of bikes you should just put out in front of your opponent's entire army and it'll survive, because that's definitely not the case. You're still GSC. These bikes are still going to die, but if you play them smart, they can really clog up your opponent's lanes to get to your other things and just be a huge road bump for you in those beginning turns, which actually is great for GSC because we have a tough time sticking on the table sometimes, and if our opponent gets to us too fast, you know, Blood Angels, some Sisters, anything that's really a fast melee army that's kind of charging at us, demons, we don't like that because we don't want to start fighting in turns 1, 2, or sometimes even 3, because we're not going to be around in turns 4 and 5. We want to score all 5 of those turns of the game. So you leverage this advantage with building up the rest of your list. As far as your neophytes, you can take squads of big 20 neophytes. I prefer the smaller squads of 10 with the 2 seismic cannons. I know this is a little less efficient as far as if you're going to use a strat on them. This just makes it way harder for your opponent to kill all the neophytes. Because if they have a squad of 20, first blast becomes an issue, especially with the guard codex coming out. And your opponent just has one main target that they know they have to shoot at, as opposed to 2 or even 3. So I would throw in a bunch of neophytes with 2 seismic cannons each. I was high on mining lasers there for a little bit, but I think I was proven wrong. Proved myself wrong on that one. I like the seismic cannons better, as everybody seems to. I also really like 3 rock grinders in this list. The rock grinders, the damage 2 with the AP2 is kind of sad sometimes, especially if you're playing like Death Guard, anything with armor contempt. But with the D3 mining laser shots and industrial affinity, they're definitely going to put out quality shooting. And they have the 6-up Feel No Pain from War Convoy with -1 damage. They're actually surprisingly very tough. And these are, again, things that can come right behind your bikes or right in front of your bikes and just get in your opponent's way and be extremely annoying for 300 and some points of your list. They're hard to kill. They'll hold your opponent in place and let you do your GSC shenanigans around the rest of the table while you score points. Now, you're also still going to need melee and shooting elements, because you can't just think that those bikes are going to kill stuff. The bikes will put out some damage, but really they're there to move block your opponent and get him stuck and block out him getting on objectives. So the shooting elements can absolutely be the neophytes and the rock grinders. That helps out a little bit in melee as well. But I would still want maybe some Genestealers that have the pre-game or pre-blip, after-blip move, proficient planning, or I would throw in some acolytes that have the 3d6 pick the 2 highest charge proficient planning with maybe those cutters because you're not suffering the negative from them, or some acolytes and trucks if you decide not to go with the rock grinders. Just keep in mind you're definitely still needing a melee threat in there. And it can't just be one unit because that's just not how GSC works. It's going to have to be multiple units spread out so that when your opponent kills that unit after it charges, which they're going to do, you have another one ready in the wings to come in as that second and third wave. So some weaknesses that I see in this list is the bikes aren't OBSEC. If you could find a way to get to the bikes OBSEC, I think this list would be amazing. I mean, as we see with Necrons, armies that have easy secondary game with all OBSEC are just going to be good. Like the Necrons data sheets aren't great, but just because they have good secondaries not good, the best secondaries in the game, and everything can be OBSEC. They can drop hundreds on people, and I think GSC would be able to do the same thing if these bikes were OBSEC. So just running a bunch of bikes on an objective, your opponent's probably going to have something OBSEC on there. If they don't, definitely this is a tactic you can use to steal the objective away from them. But the bikes by themselves aren't going to be able to steal objectives. So what is going to be able to steal objectives is bikes running onto an objective, even charging a unit on there if it's not going to kill the entire unit. Having your icon ward, right behind there, safe somewhere, but within that 6-inch aura range to bring them back. And then that unit that comes from lying in wait, deep strike within 3, that is OBSEC, like Acolytes, drops right on the objective behind the bikes. And now you've stolen the objective from your opponent, and they've got to do some work to get through that unit of 10 bikes to actually get to your OBSEC bodies, or they shoot them with something else. And nobody likes shooting 5 Acolytes because it's a huge waste of shots, and then you have other things on the table that are actual threats. So the next weakness I can see, the bikes just aren't that tough. They're T4 with a 6-up feel no pain, and you can't wound them on better than a 3+, but still, they're just 2 wounds with a 4+ save. Things are going to kill them if they really get into them. But they are so many wounds that it's going to take a while for things to kill them. But you are still going to have to be smart with these bikes, and because they can't just drive through walls, they're a little harder to hide than infantry units. But the 14-inch move should make up for a lot of that. So just keep in mind that you can't just park these things directly out in the open and expect to survive a Tau or Votan or guard soon-to-be shooting phase. So some good strategies for these. It all depends on your opponent, but say you're going first and you have an opponent who's kind of a slow-moving army. With the pregame move that the bikes get, you can move forward and really block your opponent off of a lot of the objectives and tie them up for a turn or two, while you kind of run away with a primary score turns 2 and 3. And then it really makes it hard for your opponent to catch back up after that. Yeah, all your bikes are going to die probably by turn 3, but if that happens and you've held your opponent back off of the objectives by screening with your bikes, that's a huge win for you. Now that strategy is not going to work into things that can just hop over your bikes with fly, or re-deep strike things. So just always make sure you look at your opponent's army to figure out what the best strategy is. Another tricky aspect of playing this list is going to be the placement of your icon ward. I've definitely played games where I played with a ton of neophytes, like the 20-man bricks with mining weapons, and it took me a few games to really get into the habit of making sure my icon ward was centrally located, so as I even took casualties, he was still within 6 inches come my command phase to bring those models back. It really takes some pre-planning to move the icon ward to a spot where, 1, he's not going to just get completely killed because he's not tough at all, and 2, where he's still going to be in a spot where he can use his banner to bring people back even after you've taken casualties. So a good thing to do with infantry, it's a little easier. With bikes, you might be able to do it depending on how the terrain looks, but with infantry, I would put a few models outside of line of sight blocking terrain with the rest of the unit inside, and then as my opponent shoots it, you take those models that they can see away, and then the next target can't see your neophytes, or in this case your bikes, who are now inside the building, so they're safe from any other shooting, and you're guaranteed with that icon ward in their same building to bring back some bites or neophytes. Instead of the front of the building, if it's like a square, you're going to have to do it at the side because your bikes are going to have to drive out of there next turn. You don't want to spend a ton of movement doing that. But if it's your setup turn, it's definitely worth it to sacrifice that movement to make sure you have some bikes alive for the rest of the game. The icon ward also is tough to have in a spot. Once the bikes move completely away from him and forward, he only moves 6 inches and he advances. And I don't really think you want him deep striking in this list or coming in out of ambush, just because you still want him there to bring back your neophytes as well in those early turns. So really getting a good forward position with him in the center of the table, just advancing him turn 1 straight up, is probably the best, and hope there's some terrain there you can hide him in, or just put him in a big block of 20 neophytes and let him survive like that by being behind that and behind some of the bikes. Outside of the icon ward, you definitely want to include a Primus in this list because all those bikes are core, and your neophytes obviously are B core. So the Primus buff, his reroll 1s to hit and his reroll 1 to wound, are going to buff the majority of your army. And that is also why I would throw in a Nexos to throw that Primus buff across the table onto those bikes, because you know those bikes won't be deep striking down. You know they're already going to be on the table to receive that Primus buff, which rerolling 1s to wound on all those bike shots is actually a pretty big deal. So that's it as far as a general overview of the GSC bike spam list. If any of you have played it out there at tournaments, definitely let me know how it went. If you think I'm talking crazy, but that's kind of see how I would play it going forward, and I'm definitely going to give it a try in the next coming weeks here to see how I like it against my buddy's guard and against Votan and some other armies out there to see how it stands up to that extra shooting, especially now with AdMech being at their full, the way they were in the Codex first came out. I feel like shooting is going to come back in a big way in the game, and the -1 hit that the bikes have might not be enough, but maybe they just have enough wounds to survive with that war convoy. I would definitely be pleasantly surprised if that's the case. Thanks everybody for listening, and good luck in all your GSC games out there. It's a really cool time to be playing competitive 40k. I think the meta's in a great place, and I hope the Guard Codex doesn't ruin it. Thanks for listening. If you guys enjoyed, please like and subscribe, and I'll have some more content out shortly.